Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about where traditional media is at today, and my experiences within. Because I work in traditional media, what was the term she used a moment ago to talk about traditional media? What was the term you used when you introduced me? Where did it go here? Traditional marketing. I forget the word you used, but it was like, oh my God, is that what we are now? Now radio, television, and newspapers are this like ancient thing of the past. I've got news for you. We're still kicking around, and all that stuff that we have on the internet is basically the same stuff. It's news, it's stories, it's videos, it's music, it's audio, video, and the written word, and it's the exact same stuff that we've been doing in the Western world for a couple hundred years now. It's just delivered in a different way. So when we talk about newspapers and newsprint, we're often talking about the physical newspaper copy. And yes, it is a fact that subscriptions and readership on paper are waning, but actually readers and consumers of news are always going to be strong. And I looked up something today, something like 70% of people in the United States, this was a story that NPR, National Public Radio in the States, had on their website. It's from data released in 2016. At that point, 70% of people in the US are reading newspapers on a regular basis, which is lower than it would have been, say, in the 1950s or 60s when 80, 90% of adults were reading newspapers regularly. 70% now, though, it's a great bounce back. It's just that they're getting in a different way. 25% of people most of your age are reading newspapers in the United States of America. So my industry is not going anywhere. We just have to keep growing and catching up. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Because times are tough in traditional media, I sold a sponsorship for my talk here today. So I need to say that my Ideas on Tap presentation today is brought to you by Betty's Brazilians, where this week only 100% off is 20% off. My background, 10 years as a radio broadcaster, about 20 years now as a freelance television broadcaster, 17 years as an advertising sales consultant for radio, for print, and to a lesser degree now as part of what we do, digital. Essentially, most of you in this room, I was in media by the time your parents conceived you during makeup sex after having an argument about Pearl Jam versus Soundgarden. So I've been around a long, long time, but that doesn't mean I'm a freaking dinosaur. I know a lot of things that a lot of people your age or younger than me might not know, and you guys know a ton of stuff that I don't know. And I was here a couple weeks back when you had the Take Your Parents to Work Day, and I thought it was fascinating what's going on here, even though I had some inkling of it, and I'm sort of familiar with the platform or platforms or the products that Vendasta puts together, so I'm trying to keep up. But that's a big problem in our industry. The traditional media industries didn't keep up. Bill talked about the internet kind of showing up starting to really become a thing in the mid or later part of the 90s, and traditional media companies sort of sat there. I think you even alluded to it and said, I'm not sure what to do with that, but we got this thing over here, so let's just keep at it. And that might have been a mistake. In the early days of newspapers in particular, if you wanted to read a newspaper online, you'd run into a paywall, and then very quickly they said, no, we can't do this, it's not working, people aren't reading our stuff, whatever, let's just give this shit away for free, everybody else is, and there will be no repercussions. And 15 years later, nobody wants to be a journalist anymore. It pays horribly crappy. As a result, the people that are becoming journalists now, for the most part, suck, because any idiot can get into J school, because there's no lineup to go to journalism school anymore. I don't want a shitty minimum wage job and have half the people in this room and every other room tell me I'm an idiot for the rest of my life. Who wants that freaking job, right? So news media in general have a whole lot of catching up to do. Every single person in the world has a publish button today. That also probably seemed like a good idea at the time. But now we got Brexit, and now we got Trump, and who knows what the hell is coming down the pike. And I think that stuff is a big part of it. So thanks to the hard work of amazing technology minds, we now have given a voice to the dimmest wits in the entire planet. Never before has an idiot been as powerful as an idiot is now. And now they're being exploited by the nefarious. Russia, for example, the whole fake news thing. So I think of all the great things that come of the technology and the stuff that's being developed here and at other places, the one thing that traditional media still focuses on to a degree and needs to maybe make our hallmark is the fact that we're not full of shit, ever. Not for 5 minutes of a day are we lying to you. Not for 5 minutes a day are we stringing you along. Bill was right. Newspapers, mass media outlets of all manner, traditional, do often have a slant or a point of view. But when they make a mistake, they're accountable. And I heard a great bit on the radio when I was driving down to Regina last weekend. There's a terrific comedy club in New York called the Comedy Cellar. All the greats in American comedy have been through there. There's a table in the corner at the Comedy Cellar where all the dudes and dudettes and the comedy bigwigs, they all hang out. It's like a little private table in the corner for all the best and the brightest in the comedy community. And the owner of the Comedy Cellar, who has nurtured comedians for 30, 40, 50 years now, allows these top-level comedians, up-and-comers, whatever, to come and sit at that table, and it's just kind of it's sitting around the water cooler for them is what it is. There's a comedian in the United States who happens to be a gay man who wrote an article recently, and I don't recall what media outlet picked it up, but this is a person who's a comedian who now has a publish button. An interesting figure for sure, but media is being pressed every day more and more into giving these people a voice because content. So what are we getting? We're getting huge heaping piles of shit. And this guy writes a story about how that table, that little table in the corner of the Comedy Cellar, is endemic of the problem we have with the likes of Louis C.K., who I love and is so brilliant, and now I have to hate him. And now he's over there in that pile. This guy was suggesting that that culture at that table in this comedy club was protecting him because everybody knew what was going on. And that article was seen by millions of people around the world and in America. And yeah, oh my God, and all this stir. So I hear this story or this program on the radio. They brought that writer, journalist in. They brought in the owner of the Comedy Cellar. They brought in a panel of a few regular comedians who have been part of that scene, including a woman who is a comedian, an African-American who is a comedian, a gay person who is a comedian. They all sat around, they had it out on this. And at the end of it, they basically beat the living bejesus out of that guy who wrote the article in a kind way. But the point of it all was that guy said stuff that he never would have gotten away with saying in a newspaper because he would have had to be responsible for the words he's saying. You write that story, you bring it to your editor. And by the way, it's Heather Pearson, the editor of the Star Phoenix in Saskatoon. I do know the name. My wife works there. There's accountability. That guy would have been called in front of an editor who would have said, okay, you're talking here at great length about how the culture of that community, that comedy community, knew about Louis C.K. What do you mean they knew? They didn't know. You're saying there was rumors and everybody knew the rumors. That's two very different things. So these little missteps like this are messing things up so bad. And fake news now is just rampant because there's no accountability. If I can go on the internet today and say something and it's taken as the truth by, well, in my case, not very many people, but some people, and this stuff just spread, everything moves so fast. So where I think traditional media outlets are still going to flourish and thrive and be important is in being accountable for not making mistakes, and when they do make mistakes, retracting it, or somebody gets fired. That's how it works in a newspaper or in a newsroom. So I'm very hopeful that we haven't gone so far down the rabbit hole that there's no coming back ever. Just my life experience, how it used to be, how I remember it. If a group of people sat down to have a beer and got to talking about something that was a heated subject like politics or whatever the case, there was respect at the table, there was decorum, there was a bit of humility, and it didn't matter if everybody there agreed with the same thing. I can remember my parents hanging out and having a great time sitting around the kitchen table, drinking way too many whiskeys and playing cards and screaming and yelling, and that guy has an NDP bumper sticker on his car, and that guy has a progressive conservative bumper sticker on his car, and that guy has a Liberal Party bumper sticker on their car, and yet here they are. And it seems to me we're throwing that out the window because of the insulation and anonymity that the internet. So in less than 20 years, it seems like we've destroyed decorum in debate in the country and, the Western world. Ignorance is being mined because it's the hottest commodity on the planet, and it's going to be up to your generation to fix it. So I probably shouldn't talk anymore. Go fix the damn world. You guys started this shit, right? No. Sorry, sponsor. Trouble in your relationship? Let us smooth things over. Betty's Brazilians. Traditional media didn't see the crap starting to hit the fan. Our industry was way too slow to pick up on technology and then panicked. So news outlets caved in and allowed content to be free, and if you give it away, journalism is going to suffer. If journalism suffers, we got a big problem in a democracy. Newspaper reporters used to be very, very well paid. We're talking about lawyer money. Newspaper reporters, not editors and publishers, but the actual reporters. People went into journalism because they had an altruistic purpose perhaps, but you would make real good money. They were respected members of our community. Now we have a situation where, and there's nothing right about this, we've got a country led by a jackass who is constantly feeding the idea that journalists are terrible, terrible people. Again, George Carlin said, think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize that half of them are stupider than that. And those people at the bottom of that half are being tapped into, and it's ridiculous. And yeah, Donald Trump is being called out on it, but it's something that you might never be able to change the way people think about him, the way our democracy is going, unless we start understanding as a society collectively on this continent, the whole Western world, that journalists are not liars, they're not bad people, they're not morons, they're not as good as they used to be because we don't pay them enough. There's a problem we should maybe address and fix. But it's really crappy right now, and because of it, we're getting bombarded with poorly written and irresponsible information at every turn, like the comedy seller story. And while the industry itself has eroded, in North America, governments and private corporations have ramped up their public relations efforts. And if that doesn't give you pause, it really, really should. I found a quote online today from a guy named Paul Holmes. He is the CEO of the Holmes Report, which is an ass-kissing association that advocates for the public relation industry. Turns out PR industry across America slowed last year. Globally, in fact, it's slowed down a little bit, thank dog. But here's a part of the quote from this Paul Holmes fellow. Quote, at a time when engagement, authenticity, transparency, credibility, the things that PR is good at, are increasingly critical to successful brand building. And that's all the quote I put down. I didn't finish the rest because the context of that subject is completely irrelevant. He said the things that PR is good at, authenticity, credibility, and transparency. I have not heard anything more fucking outrageous in my life than saying public relations people are good at authenticity, credibility, and transparency. Their existence is to avoid at all costs credibility and transparency. The purpose of the public relations industry existing within a corporate structure or a government structure is to not let the truth get out. And what this guy described is not the PR industry, it's journalism. And this is where opportunity lies, and this is why I'm not worried, I'm not upset. Well, I'll be dead anyway. I don't give a rat's ass about my kids' problems. It's all theirs. I told my kids, go get a vasectomy. We don't have to worry about global warming now. We don't have to worry about the failure of democracy. It's all good to me. But for those of you who do care, you have 13-year-old kids. By the way, the next 10, 15 years is going to be so awful for you. It gets better. It gets better. I think, I hope. Journalism is going to come back. The New York Times, Washington Post, these newspapers, among many others in the LA, what's the LA Times? Is it the LA Times? These places are flourishing and expanding. They're hiring more journalists. They're growing. I think the Washington Post now has something like 750 journalists in one newsroom. That's great news. Subscriptions for the big players in the market are on the rise. And like I said, 70% of people, including 25% of what they call millennials, are now reading newspapers. So they're reading them in a different way. And that is where we need to pick things up. Some of us are picking things up. I'm a very small outfit. Our company is tiny. We have a Planet S in Saskatoon, Prairie Dog Magazine in Regina. We print a bi-weekly paper. We're not a newspaper. We're not talking about what just happened today. We've tried to carve ourselves a niche by giving more in-depth space and time and energy to stories that are marginalized in the daily press, underreported in the day-to-day media. But we've worked at it, and I'll talk about that in a second. The Star Phoenix, the daily newspaper here in Saskatchewan, or in Saskatoon, via their multiple platforms now, actually reaches more people in Saskatoon on a day-to-day basis than they did 25 years ago. It's just they reach them in a different way. And they've been working their butts off over there for the last 4 or 5 years to try and develop that, despite being under the weight of a company that Post Media, owned by Godfrey, etc., that is like really upside down and bleeding money at an unbelievable pace. On a local level, that office a couple blocks over and a couple blocks down is actually a profitable venture. It's just they're being crushed a little bit by the weight of the big overall picture. But they're trying and they're learning and they're getting things straightened out. So the trick for us is to adapt to ways that a newspaper or for radio and television can reach out. So the obvious ones being website, social media, interactive content, you name it. We're trying to be in these places with good effect because the bill of goods that everybody sold you here at Vendasta about all this business about digital this, digital that, it's true. The Kool-Aid that you guys have been drinking is good damn Kool-Aid. It's right. You're going in the right, none of us will ever deny that this stuff and the things that you guys are creating are game changers, but they're effective and they will continue to work and grow. It's just that we have to get on board. So traditional media is in a chase position right now. We're running our asses off. We see you guys up there and it's like, wait, we're coming. So many of your customers, I understand, across North America are traditional media outlets. That's where a lot of the movement of your platforms began, with newspapers like the one Bill used to work at, maybe, buying this platform so that they can go out now and have a digital presence, but further sell it to their customer base. So that is hugely important. It's just taking a little bit of time, and it's when you hear the woes and the oh my and the ooh, it's terrible, that's not untrue, but it's not unsavable in my opinion. We still have traditional media outlets producing the best content in the world. In fact, the only content that matters. I do love myself a good kiddie video now and again, but I'm not going to spend very much time with that stuff. If I can read about what an incredible idiot Donald Trump is, I'm going that way. And then I have to try and get past all that, which is like 85% like garbage, to actual real news. And this is, to me, the biggest problem, is how do we get society, culture as a whole paying attention to things that matter right now? And I think a big part of it is to stay the course and keep telling the truth and being accountable for it. Bill also touched on the fact that being in a smaller town newspaper, you had to worry a little bit about what you were writing and how it might affect the advertising clients. That was always a concern. I hope we've reached a point now where, as a publisher, as a media company, we don't care what our potential clients think about what we wrote. We've tried to pound that into their heads in as gentle a manner as we can for 15 years that I've been doing this. Hey, why don't you guys do this or that, do this? You should do a story about this, a story about that. We opened a new business. We think this is a great story. It's like, you opened a business? That's a story? Or are you out of, we don't say it that way, but are you nuts? You opened a cupcake shop and that's news in Saskatoon. It's ridiculous. The things that, and in people's defense when they're doing that, they're just trying to buy themselves some publicity. And I understand that, but it's really important that traditional media companies don't cave in or don't give in and start becoming just space for advertorial. There's lots of that on the internet. There's a lot of, I see so much content on the internet that I have no interest in. And my 17-year-old son will come and tell me about this or that and show me something. And I'm like, why on earth? How does that guy make money? Well, this many people watch that. Why would they watch that? And where's the money changing hands? He has to explain this stuff to me. We are never going to do that as traditional media companies. We'll never be able to create these brands out of poof, thin air. All of a sudden, Ed is a guy for what? I don't even know what half the people on TV are freaking famous for anymore. I don't know what's going on. We can't play in that arena. We have to do our best in the area that we know, which is supporting democracy by making sure that the people that are running things are held accountable. And I think as the internet and digital has exploded and oh my God, there's something new every 3 minutes, we lost sight of it. Consumers have lost sight of it. But I like to believe that there's a pendulum swing coming back where most people under 30 will have a bullshit detector permanently set to 100%, and every single thing they see now. My mom even gets a little bit online now and says, oh, I got this thing the other day, that's fake. And it's like, yay, she's finally starting to understand. The Moose Jaw Chamber of Commerce shared a bit on their Facebook a couple of weeks ago about Garth Brooks looking for a house in Moose Jaw. The frickin' Moose Jaw Chamber of Commerce put that on their Facebook page, and it got shared all around their community and their followers and likes on Facebook. And that city just lost their daily newspaper. Do you see a potential frickin' problem here? So I think traditional media is extremely important. We need to figure out how to deliver our product to as many people as your kind of world can reach. And then we need to figure out a way to make money on it. The reality right now is if we put stuff on our content on our website and we share it on social media and we try and get it out there and we can't generate enough money to pay for the production of the content. We still can't make enough money to generate good content. It's pretty easy to generate content that gets views and gets noticed and gets likes and gets buzz. But again, we need to generate content that is important to democracy, and that costs money. So we got to figure that out. The internet to me is an infinite haystack, and there's 5 million needles in there. How do you ever find the one needle? I just keep getting sucked back into somebody's cat video when I go there. So I don't know how we're supposed to get the world to focus on what matters. I mean, the newscasts on the radio always used to have, and TV always had a kicker. The back pages of the newspaper always had the stupid cat story. That's where that stuff used to be. And now I find in the digital age, that stuff is all up front, and the crap that matters is buried somewhere after it. So because traditional media missed the boat at the start, things are out of sync. They're just out of sync. But I have faith, and I have confidence. And I also want you to know that no nook is too nooky, new cranny too cranny, from your new boyfriend to your not dead yet granny, Betty's Brazilians. Thank you very much for giving me a little time today. And please support Betty's Brazilians. Thank you.